On that same day, two of his disciples were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. Please be seated. Church, artists, and sex workers plan experimental Easter service. This was the headline of a media advisory that I sent out in 2007 for an event called Easter at Avalon. 1 year earlier, now 20 years ago, Isaac Everett and I co-founded Transmission, a small, emerging liturgical community, initially a house church, which ranged in size from 6 to 16 regular attendees at twice monthly Wednesday evening gatherings. We organized Easter at Avalon on April 8th, 2007 at 6 p.m. in Club Avalon in New York City on 20th Street and 6th Avenue. We raised money to rent the club that Easter evening when today's gospel, the road to Emmaus, is the assigned text. Club Avalon was in the former Episcopal Church of the Holy Communion, founded by the Reverend William Augustus Muhlenberg, whose feast day was Easter that year. Muhlenberg's bio is amazing and extensive. He was the great-grandson of the founder of the Lutheran Church in North America, for whom Muhlenberg College is named, and the grandson of the first Speaker of the House of Representatives. He was central to the 19th century Oxford movement in the United States, which led to the Episcopal Church having weekly communion and flowers and candles. He's considered the father of Episcopal education, and he is still prominently featured in materials from the National Association of Episcopal Schools. He also founded St. Luke's Hospital in Manhattan, which is now Mount Sinai Morningside. His ministry partner was a woman named Anne Ayers, who was the first Episcopal religious in 1845. She became a nun, saying, so far as it was known, not a single sister has been professed anywhere in the Anglican Communion for 300 years. And the Church of the Holy Communion, paid for by Muhlenberg's sister, was designed by Richard Upjohn as the very first asymmetrical Gothic revival building in the United States in 1844. Upjohn later designed Trinity Wall Street and co-founded the American Institute of Architects. Muhlenberg was rector of this church until 1860, and over the next century, church membership declined as the Chelsea neighborhood changed. And in the 1970s, the church merged with Calvary and St. George's, where I was later a seminarian, and where Calvin Hampton was the music director at Calvary. And the building became a drug rehab center. And in a tragic real estate moment, the drug rehab center closed and sold the building to a developer who reopened it as the Limelight in 1983. A notoriously wild nightclub that was closed by federal agents in the early 2000s. There's a movie called Party Monster, starring Macaulay Culkin and Seth Green, that tells the story of a club promoter who killed a club drug dealer. The club later reopened as Club Avalon in 2003. When we visited the space to negotiate rentals and rehearsals, it felt sad and forsaken. But we were young and we were inspired by William Augustus Muhlenberg, who in 1867, when he was in his early 70s, started a radical ministry to help brothel workers and abandoned mistresses start new lives, called the Midnight Mission. He had a sermon circuit to raise money for the rescue of fallen women, as he called them. And some of the saddest stories, he says, are those of female immigrants who, upon landing on our shores, are allured to the boarding houses where scoundrels with lying promises, or with the lures of money, with the baits of vanity, with the stupefying cup, or with violence, rifle them of their all, and leave them, lost strangers in a strange land, for other harpies to devour. He tells other stories and quotes scripture, and then the sermon becomes directed at his audience of high society men. And he warned them, saying they know who they are and what they have done, and he offers them a way out. They can make restitution by supporting his midnight mission. You cannot show mercy, he says, to the poor souls with whom you did your iniquities, but show it to their followers in their iniquities, so far as they will accept it, lest both appear as witnesses against you at the final trial. Muhlenberg understood wealth and power, as well as the power of wealth to do good in the world. He had a deep commitment to the gospel and to the marginalized, and he went to wealthy people to fund his outreach ministries. Our media advisory for Easter at Avalon stated the service will focus on Mary Magdalene's role in the gospel resurrection story, her personal relationship with Jesus, her witness on behalf of the risen Christ, and contemporary sex worker issues. Mary was the first person in all four Gospels to meet the risen Christ, and she was a foundational apostle. And yet one of the early church fathers conflated her with a prostitute in the Gospels more than a millennia ago. In the modern era, much work has been done to reclaim her true significance, and also, the Bible is clear that Jesus hung out with prostitutes. Working with friends of ours who are former sex workers, our collaborators included members of PONY, the Prostitutes Organization of New York, and author and advocate Tracy Kwan, who wrote a series of novels and had columns in The Guardian, delivered a sermon on Mary Magdalene. Artists from Storytelling, a Jewish ritual theater company, were part of the evening that also included modern dance and a DJ. My brother John performed a poem about King Arthur and Morgan Le Fay summoned back from the mythical island of Avalon in a young girl's dream about healing the planet. Isaac led a live band that included Madonna's Like a Prayer, Bon Jovi's Keep the Faith, and a setting of Psalm 114 that also incorporated the Bee Gees' Staying Alive. And I created a gigantic, interactive, historical timeline of the building. More than 200 people came. The evening also included a deconstructed Holy Communion, where people gathered in small groups of 6 to 10, introduced themselves, shared something from the past week for which they were grateful, and then one person in each group read the Emmaus story, which takes place on Easter evening, when two disciples were walking and talking about what had happened, and Jesus joins him, and then they tell him the story of his life and death and resurrection, including that some women of our group astounded us. And then he tells them the story of God's plans for salvation in Scripture. And they invite him to dinner where he takes the bread and he blesses it and he breaks it and he shares it. And then he disappears. And they go to Jerusalem and they tell the disciples the story of their encounter and how they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. And we, the listeners, we recognize ourselves as part of this ongoing story. Emmaus is a story about Eucharist, but it's also about stories themselves. Emmaus reminds us that we can meet Christ in a stranger, in community, in communion, and that Jesus is still present among us. That night in 2007, the Spirit danced again in Holy Communion. It was a fabulous celebration of the resurrection. And our Easter service was likely the last worship service there. Avalon closed that year. It became a mini mall and then a gym. Later that month of April, I met my husband, George. And 3 years later, our son was born, and 6 months after that, I started serious discernment for ordination. Transmission gathered all together in various forms for about 7 years. And including me, 6 transmission leaders were ordained. Episcopal, UCC, and Presbyterian. Isaac Everett is now an Episcopal priest and executive director of a series of intentional living houses in Boston called Creche. But the biggest impact of that group is that we were pastors to each other. We helped each other move into new apartments. We visited each other in the hospital. We prayerfully confided our fears. We mourned the passing of parents. And we celebrated 3 weddings of couples who either met or were active in transmission. You never know where your faith journey is going to take you. And we can always learn from history. Sometimes it sparks new ideas and approaches to ministry. 2,000 years after that first Easter, we still experience the risen Christ in the breaking of the bread, whether 2 or 3 are gathered, or 200 or 3,000, and in sharing our stories. Thank you for listening to me share this one.